Late one night, I overheard my wife whispering about how she planned to ruin me after our divorce, taking everything I own. I kissed her good night without a word. 3 days later, my phone exploded with 44 desperate messages begging me to talk. I thought I understood partnership, marriage, and trust. Turns out I was wrong on all counts. This isn't a quick story, and it didn't happen overnight. It's been building for years, like water under a foundation, slowly eroding something you thought was solid. And by the time I realized what was happening, the damage had already been done, or so my wife thought. We had actual staff, real overhead, and a reputation for getting results. "Oh, come on, Cal," she said, ruffling my hair like I was a child. "People like a clean story. Power couple makes you sound like a bank executive. Just let me handle the public side." It works. I swallowed my pride. It wasn't worth an argument. On paper, we were equals, co-founders, co-owners, co-EOs. But in practice, Neen slowly started steering things in her direction. I tried to talk to Neen about it privately, and she flat out told me I was being controlling, that I was intimidated by his energy. Neen brought in her own financial consultant, a guy named Carter, who always gave me a weird, slick vibe like he was constantly sizing me up. "Callum doesn't even realize I've already moved most of the assets," she whispered. "The rest will be done by the end of the quarter. Carter said the new entity will be under my name only. If we time it right, I'll walk away with everything. He'll be too busy trying to figure out what happened." There was a pause, then laughter low, cruel, satisfied. She continued, "It's poetic, really. The final straw, the moment I can't get out of my head, came 2 weeks ago. He's so obsessed with being fair. He won't see it as betrayal until it's too late. And Julian's got his back if he tries anything legal. He's already been helping with the restructuring. We've got it locked down." My hand tightened on the water glass. For a moment, I just stood there in the hallway, listening, heart pounding, stomach twisted. I didn't barge in. I didn't say a word. I walked back to our bedroom, climbed into bed next to her, and when she turned in her sleep, I kissed her good night. It was a Tuesday night. I'd stayed up late reviewing a contract that Julian had butchered. Neen had gone to bed early. Around midnight, I got up to grab some water and heard her voice down the hall, soft, but clear enough. I started noticing other things. Neen changed the passwords to some of our shared business accounts. She said it was just to streamline access. But suddenly, I couldn't check our marketing analytics or client invoices without going through her. She was always the face of the company, which I didn't mind at first. "He'll be our creative growth consultant," she said. "He's great at thinking outside the box." "Has he even worked a full-time job before?" "Callum, don't be like that. He just needs structure. He's family." I caved again. I didn't want the spotlight. But eventually, I noticed she stopped crediting me entirely. Interviews, podcasts, guest spots, panel events. She'd refer to her company, her journey, her vision. Everyone, I'm Callum, 38M. And up until a few weeks ago, I thought I understood what loyalty meant. We met at a regional business networking event when we were both in our mid-20s. Now Julian, 34M, is a piece of work, always has been. He's the type of person who walks into a room and assumes everyone is just waiting to be impressed by him. He's jumped from project to project for as long as I've known him: cryptocurrency, motivational speaking, dropshipping. He doesn't show up on time. He skips meetings. He talks over our staff with empty buzzwords and vague promises. He once suggested we rebrand everything using only emotionally resonant colors and then spent company money hiring an aura photographer. Nothing stuck for more than 6 months. Somehow, he always had an excuse for why things didn't work out. The market wasn't ready. Or, people just don't get visionaries. I was working as a supply chain analyst, stable, well-paying job, very numbers-driven. She was in brand strategy consulting for startups. He's just misunderstood, she'd say. If he had someone to guide him, he'd be unstoppable. So when he came to her saying he wanted to get serious and help grow the family empire, she welcomed him in without hesitation. She had this energy to her, like the whole room naturally shifted to where she was standing. I guess I was drawn in. She said I made her feel grounded. To give you a bit of background, I've been married to Neen, 36F, for just over a decade. I told her she made me feel alive. And for the first few years, that seemed true. I handled back-end strategy, operations, logistics stuff like pricing models and supply chain streamlining. Neen handled client acquisition, pitches, and the creative side. We made a good team, or at least I thought we did. We got married 2 years after meeting, moved into a modest home in the suburbs, and started talking about building something together. Neen always said she didn't want to waste her talents making someone else rich. And after a while, her enthusiasm rubbed off on me. I left my job, cashed out part of my retirement early, and we launched a consulting firm that helped mid-sized businesses restructure their branding and operations. At first, it was just the two of us working out of a rented co-working space and taking on small contracts. Within 3 years, we were doing better than I ever imagined. I brought it up once, carefully, and she brushed it off with a laugh. But the first real crack came when she insisted on hiring her younger brother, Julian. Neen had a soft spot for him the size of Texas. I objected politely at first. He doesn't have a background in strategy. Neen, what's he going to do exactly? That was 6 months ago. Since then, Julian has drained time, money, and energy from everyone around him like a sinkhole. The staff started going around him. Clients started getting confused. Our bookkeeper, a woman named Darlene who'd been with us since the early days, was suddenly let go with no explanation. I stopped walking. She was on the phone in the guest room. The door was cracked open. I heard her say my name. He built the skeleton. I made it shine. I didn't sleep at all that night. After hearing that conversation, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling in the dark while Neen snored softly beside me. Every breath she took felt like a mockery. Every little, harmless decision she'd made that now looked like a carefully planted brick in a long, methodical trap. I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I couldn't confront her yet. The kind of betrayal I was facing wasn't just personal, it was professional. Buried in the server's archive logs, I found folders labeled under odd internal codes. Nothing labeled outright as private or confidential, just a long string of letters and numbers. But when I opened one of them, my stomach dropped. Neen and I used to meet weekly with our accountant, but over the past 6 months, those meetings had been postponed or handled without me. Now I saw why. She had opened a secondary business account at another bank, one we didn't use. I only knew about it because I found a wire transfer receipt saved in one of the folders. Inside were dozens of scanned contracts, financial statements, and restructuring plans I had never seen before. He listened quietly, flipping through documents and nodding slowly. "We'll challenge the new entity filing before it goes through." Something I hadn't felt in weeks. Clarity. I knew what I had to do. That night, Neen came home later than usual. "But you'll love the final product. Promise." She was so confident, so smug. It was like watching someone build their own gallows and decorate it with ribbons. "Did you take the dogs somewhere?" I didn't see their leashes. Then came the calls. Then the voicemails. I didn't answer any of them. She said she'd stayed out with Julian to work on some last-minute design pitches. She had checked the secondary account, and she had finally understood. But close enough for me to still work in the background. The lodge was quiet, empty this time of year. I had a small kitchenette, my laptop, and my backup drive. That's all I needed. The man she thought was sleeping was wide awake. I didn't call her back. First concerned, then confused, then clipped, then sweet again, then annoyed. But here's where it gets satisfying. Roland also worked with a forensic accountant. Let him send his little invoices. We'll just delay payments until he walks away. That alone made Roland raise an eyebrow. "Arrogant and sloppy," he said. "That's useful." That was when the second layer of revenge began. You see, Neen had spent months shifting the public narrative, telling our staff, our clients. She painted me as disinterested, checked out, and struggling with burnout. I had no idea that was what people thought of me, and that hurt. But it also gave me an opportunity, because now I could return not as the man who had slowly disappeared from the company, but as the man who had been quietly documenting everything. And even some of our vendors that I was stepping back from the day-to-day to focus on personal projects. Together, they combed through everything I had collected, those hidden fund transfers, those internal agreements signed without my consent. It was to trap her cleanly, quietly, legally, and it worked. While she was busy trying to call and message me, thinking she still had time to explain things her way, Roland had already filed a formal petition with our local business bureau to review and pause any restructuring that involved removing a co-founder. Even a few audio clips I had quietly recorded when Neen was talking to Julian on speakerphone at the office. The cycle repeated. "Are you okay? Please answer me." "Julian thinks something might have happened. You're scaring me. Just text back." "Callum, seriously, if this is some passive-aggressive thing, I need to know where you are. We have things to handle together." And finally, if this is about the restructuring, it's not what you think. Let's talk. I didn't respond to Nan's messages for the next 48 hours. And now she was panicking. Not because she cared about me, but because I wasn't playing the role she'd written for me. Older guy, sharp-eyed, always tapping a pen against his pad like he was thinking 12 moves ahead. He didn't waste time with small talk. "You ready?" he asked. "Yes." "Then let's move." Good. Not a single word. No texts. No calls. No social media posts. No, "Hey, I'm okay," to reassure her. I left the silence to do the talking for me. I turned off location tracking on my phone and stayed at a small business lodge just outside the city. I told no one, not even Mitchell. I needed to be completely unreachable while I prepared the next step. Some were desperate, some were frantic, and a few sounded downright nervous. One voicemail stuck with me. "Callum, okay, I don't know what's going on, but please, can you call me back? There's something I think we need to talk about urgently." That meant sending urgent requests to temporarily halt all business transitions Neen and Julian had set in motion, specifically anything that involved changes in ownership, banking access, or contractual liabilities. Roland filed on the grounds that I was a co-founder, co-owner, and still legally listed as a majority decision-maker in several core documents. I asked about them casually, and she smiled like she'd just aced a test she thought I didn't know about. But the more you can show intent to deceive, the better. Keep acting like you don't know anything. If she realizes you're aware, she speed up the process. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "She's been preparing this for a while, and she thinks you're still asleep." What can I do? Neen hadn't just planned to leave me. She was planning to erase me from our company, from our finances. Julian had countersigned as a consultant. Cotter was listed as the legal witness. Even worse, the effective date was less than a month away. She'd been funneling money for months. My hands were shaking. It was one thing to suspect betrayal. It was another to see it. I copied everything, downloaded, encrypted, and backed up on a drive I kept hidden in my home office closet. And if I hadn't overheard her, probably from any legal standing I had left. A few feet away, my wife was sleeping peacefully, calm, confident, completely unaware that her mask had slipped, that I'd finally seen what was behind it. So I waited, and I listened. The next morning, I got up early and made coffee like usual. I walked the dogs, cooked dinner, texted her sweet little updates like I always did. First, I made an appointment with a business attorney, someone recommended by my old friend Mitchell, who had gone through something eerily similar with a shady co-founder a few years ago. She responded with heart emojis, even sent me a selfie from a meeting room with Julian and Carter. All smiles and coffee cups like it was just another productive day at work. Neen came into the kitchen half an hour later, still groggy, dressed in her navy robe with her phone already in hand. "Morning," she said, kissing me on the cheek like nothing was wrong. "Can you take the dogs today?" "I've got to meet Carter and Julian downtown." I nodded. "Sure. Meeting about that new project?" She looked up, eyes flickering for the briefest moment, then smiled. "Yeah, just strategy stuff. You know how Carter gets. He likes in-person talks." She was lying again. It wasn't even subtle. I went through every moment in my head. Every red flag I'd ignored. Every time I doubted myself instead of her. Neen assumed I'd be home all day with the dogs, but I had other plans. The first thing I did was check the server backups. A while back, we'd agreed to store all company files on a cloud-based platform. Client contracts, branding decks, tax records, you name it. Neen didn't realize I still had admin-level credentials from when I first set it up years ago. I couldn't risk tipping her off before I had everything I needed. I played dumb, of course. I kissed her goodbye and watched her drive off before grabbing my keys and heading to our shared office downtown. She thought she'd locked me out, but she'd only changed the surface-level permissions. One document detailed a proposal to transition our current LLC into a new holding company entirely under Neen's name. Then I started combing through our financials. The transfer had moved $112,000 from our joint account into this secondary one over a series of smaller transactions, each just under the threshold that would trigger a standard audit flag. And still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. Over the next few days, I kept pretending everything was fine. Meanwhile, I was laying the groundwork for something she didn't see coming. I brought him everything: the files, the statements, the recordings. I didn't embellish anything. I just presented the facts. His answer came quickly: build a paper trail. Document every unauthorized transfer, every meeting you weren't included in, every contract she signed without your consent. I left that meeting with a pit in my stomach, but also something else. "They're not ready yet," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. 3 days later, I left the house early. I didn't say where I was going. By noon that day, my phone had already received 7 texts from Neen. "Hey, where are you? Callum, you okay?" By the time I checked again that evening, the message count had climbed to 44. I knew exactly what she had realized. She had opened the server. She had seen that the files were downloaded. I stayed at the lodge, tucked into the woods, just far enough from the city to feel out of reach. Meanwhile, Neen must have been unraveling. Her texts changed tone every few hours. There it was. She cracked. She knew. She knew I'd seen the documents, that I'd figured out what the restructuring really meant. By the 3rd day, I called my lawyer again. His name was Roland. We started with what he called a silent freeze. Thanks to the timing, most of their changes hadn't fully processed yet. One in particular stood out. Julian had laughed and said, "Once it's under your name, he'll be like a tenant in his own business." At this point, the goal wasn't just to stop Neen. At the same time, we submitted a request to audit our shared accounts. I found screenshots of internal messages from her, forwarded to me anonymously by one of our longtime team members. When I returned to the office that Monday, I didn't say a word to Neen or Julian. I didn't even go near the executive suite. Instead, I met with 3 staff members I trusted: Mira, Sam, and Evelyn. All had been with us since the early years. Mira handled project oversight. Sam was in client accounts. Evelyn worked in our HR and operations branch. The key argument was that Neen had used company funds without approval and attempted to restructure our business without disclosing her intent to her co-owner. It triggered a temporary compliance review. I brought them into the small side meeting room and laid out the timeline. The documents, the plans Neen and Julian had made behind closed doors. His car was still in the lot, but he never came inside. I would later find out he had tried to move a portion of Neen's as diverted funds into a separate crypto wallet and got flagged by the bank's fraud team. Roland called it a textbook panic move. Neen arrived last. She looked composed, hair pinned neatly, a structured blazer, that usual calm confidence she used like armor, but her eyes were sharper than usual. Not angry, not afraid, just calculating. Julian sat beside her. The crypto wallet tied to Julian the contract that placed 100% ownership of the restructured firm in Nan's name. To their credit, the room didn't erupt. Hugo leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes on Neen. "Which part?" I asked. "The part where you said I'd be a tenant in my own business? Or the part where Julian said you'd just stall payments until I gave up?" A unanimous decision to remove them from any and all leadership roles, freeze their shares pending further legal review, and initiate a forensic audit. The fallout began immediately. Clients who had sensed something off in recent months finally reached out, one after another, asking if I was still involved. Word travels fast in our industry, and they declined him after reviewing his prior conduct. Whether they spoke to Hugo or not, I'll never know, but I didn't have to lift a finger. When I explained the situation in private conversations, many of them offered their full support and even renewed contracts under revised terms. The judge dismissed it within the first 10 minutes of review. The new name reflected not just the design roots of our agency, but something more meaningful. The truth is, I do, but only in the way someone misses a favorite sweater before they realize it was full of holes, slowly unraveling at the seams while they convince themselves it still fit. She left a note, some photos, and her keys. And when the moment came, I let her destroy herself with her own plans. And maybe most importantly, I've learned the most valuable lesson of my life. Not everyone who smiles beside you is on your side. Some people build their empire on your back and expect you to thank them for the wait. But eventually, they forget one small thing: you built the foundation. And without you, it all comes crashing down. No apology, just a brief line about how she never thought it would come to this. I left the note in a drawer and forgot about it. Integrity. I gave Mara a permanent seat at the leadership table, Evelyn too. The people who stood by me during the storm now help steer the ship. And we've grown, not explosively, but steadily, with clients who actually respect the work we do. Why? Because every decision we'd made was backed by documentation, timestamps, financial logs, and audio recordings. And most importantly, because the judge saw the truth written plain as day. Neen had just betrayed a business partner. She had systematically tried to dismantle a man's livelihood from the inside out. A man who trusted her, a man she once claimed to love. And she failed. Their company emails were deactivated by the end of the day. Security escorted them out, not as criminals, but as liabilities. It was quiet, professional, and absolute. Julian finally spoke. "Look, you're clearly upset, but this could have been handled." "No," Mira said, cutting him off. "It couldn't. You tried to erase him." Mira glanced at me once with quiet support. Julian avoided everyone's gaze. He hadn't said a word to me since the credential freeze, but I could see the tension in his posture. "I also have audio recordings," I said, "of conversations held between these two individuals." I gestured to Neen and Julian discussing how to remove me quietly, how to drain resources, how to manipulate clients and staff. I played one, just one, the one where Neen laughed and said, "By the time he figures it out, he won't have the energy to fight. He's too soft." He looked like someone waiting for a fight that he wasn't sure he could win. They were stunned. "I knew something was off," Mira said, shaking her head. "He was our first investor, and while he wasn't a daily figure in the company, his vote carried weight. I invested in this company because I believed in Callum's vision. I don't recall ever being asked to approve a restructure, and I certainly wasn't aware of any financial diversions. This is unacceptable." She muttered something about lawyers and the truth coming out before grabbing her bag and walking out the door. The next morning, I received a single text from her. "This isn't over. You're making a huge mistake." I didn't reply because I knew something she didn't. I had already arranged a shareholders' emergency meeting, and thanks to the documentation, the audit, and the staff backing me, I had enough leverage to initiate a vote. But I didn't think it was this. Sam frowned. Our office had always favored a more modern open concept design. But for this meeting, I asked Mira to reserve the enclosed presentation suite and block the calendar for internal review. No buzzwords, no panic, just a quiet invitation sent only to those who needed to be there. She said you were tired, that you wanted out, and you've made decisions that require investigation. The board has been informed. That was the moment her expression changed. The confidence cracked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush. I simply placed a thick folder on the table and began outlining the timeline. This isn't an accusation, I said. It's a record of decisions made without full shareholder approval, of funds transferred from our joint account without disclosure, of a restructuring that would have effectively removed me from the company I helped build. She looked behind me at Mira, at Evelyn, and at Sam, who had just entered with a printed list of access logs and flagged transactions. Evelyn stayed quiet for a long time. Then she looked at me and said, "You need to say something to the team." I nodded. "Not yet, but I will." Meanwhile, Roland filed a formal notice with our business insurance providers and the bank. The fallout started immediately. Julian tried to access our internal dashboard later that week and found his credentials suspended. It flagged his account after a suspicious download attempt. He had tried to copy all of our client contact lists and historical invoice records. Neen stormed into the office shortly after, demanding to know who locked him out. That's when she saw me. I was in the conference room reviewing quarterly projections with Mira and Evelyn. She froze at the door. "Callum," she said slowly, "can we talk privately?" I stood up, calm, not angry, not loud, just in control. "We can, but first, I need you to hand over your company-issued laptop and phone. You'll be working remotely until the audit clears." Her face paled. "You're joking." "Not even a little." "You can't. I can't. We're still co-owners." For the first time, Neen looked unsure. And Julian? He didn't even show up that day. Neen didn't leave quietly. The shareholders' meeting was held on a Wednesday afternoon just after lunch. We didn't have a traditional boardroom. The total headcount was 7. Myself, Neen, Julian, our silent investor Hugo, and 3 key department leads who held fractional shares, Mira among them. Once everyone settled, I stood. I walked through every document calmly, clearly, the alternate, company account, the forged signatures, the meetings held without minutes or consent. Then I pulled out a small USB stick and plugged it into the projector. The silence that followed was crushing. Neen stood finally, her voice still polished but thinner. "This has been taken out of context," Hugo spoke next. He'd been quiet the whole time, but when he did talk, everyone listened. From there, the vote was simple, but it didn't end there. Julian tried to get hired by a smaller firm across the city. I didn't need to interfere. Neen filed a motion to contest her removal. Her attorney claimed emotional distress, breach of informal agreements, and alleged bias against her as a female business owner. The aftermath? I didn't just reclaim my share of the company. I redefined it. We rebranded slightly, quietly. As for Neen, she moved out a few weeks after the vote. I wasn't home when she packed. I didn't need to be. Julian disappeared from the scene entirely. No more smug meetings, no cryptic texts, no LinkedIn updates. He's a footnote now. Some people ask if I ever missed the version of Nina I married. I didn't win because I fought back. I won because I waited. Because I watched. It's been 9 months since that last meeting. The company is stronger. I'm sleeping again.